I was interested in the project because it was an event that took place when I was close to it as a young person. In 1970, I was the same age as these people were when they were young and passionate, full of passionate intensity. I had those same feelings, but I was slightly distracted by starting a career in the theater in New York and also starting a family. So I had that obligation that took me away from being involved completely. Would I have been? Possibly, because I believed in the cause. And the cause was that there was an unjust war going on that was going to require these people to commit to something they didn't believe in, and it could possibly end up costing their lives. So I thought they were right to rebel against that. I thought they were right to revolt against that. That revolt turned into a massive revolution, and that fascinated me because I was close enough to it to see it happening close to me. Although I wasn't directly involved with it, it was fascinating to watch because I could then see why it didn't make it. It became such a big thing that then began to eat itself because of ego. And then it dissolved before it could reach its achievement, and that fascinated me. And so therefore it kind of went away. And it was replaced by things that led to Reagan America. So I thought, well, that's fascinating. We go from just a flip, you know. So therefore, I thought, well, someday, now we're moving away from it. Times have changed so much. Someday, this will be a story worth telling, but it should be classified as a piece of American history. Therefore, we need time to pass. So now, 30 years has passed. I felt it was time that we could tell that story. That's a good point. Yes, you're right. That I guess if I had a scheme to making film, it would be broken into three parts. There's what's the story, the characters, and where's the emotion. So the story is set, a movement that failed, and people were trapped by the movement because they took on a false identity because they didn't want to go to jail for what they believed in, so they went underground. And times change, attitudes change, they change. But they're stuck with not their true names. They take on a whole different life. They become soccer moms, you know, PTA chairmen, that kind of stuff. And yet, they're not who they really are supposed to be because they have that false identity. So therefore, how long can that go on before they can't live with it anymore? That, to me, was the story worth telling. Not the event itself. That's already been covered by documentaries and films. It's what was the cost of that on lives later lived. That's what interested me. Well, first of all, the film took about 4 to 5 years to bring to fruition. It took a long time to shape because the book was a very big, wide book with a lot of plot lines and so forth. It had to be reshaped to make into a film. That took a while. Then once it got there, I realized there was really a good role, but what happens is when you're that involved in shaping a story, you pretty well begin to own it. And that means you own the characters within. And that particular character, I feel I just knew so well, I wanted to play him. I'm pretty prepared with the film. In other words, I have a pretty clear idea about how I want to tell the story and a very clear idea about the characters involved because that's an important part. But because I am an actor, because I have huge respect for actors, because I was blessed in this particular film to have the best cast imaginable, but if you look at carefully, they're all actors. And therefore, if an actor is worth their weight, you want to give them freedom. You want to let them bring something to the table. So you don't want to ever close them off, say, this is the way it is, this way I want it. You maybe give them a guideline. You talk about what the guideposts are, and then you let them fill in the spaces, and you play with that. And that's fun. It's just fun. You give the actor a chance to play, and then you play with it. It's almost like a dance. Probably. I mean, first of all, if you look at the core of the stories I've told that were political thrillers, I would think More Than All the President's Men was 3 Days of the Condor. You could probably put that in a softer play with The Candidate and so forth. They all carry the same thread of the powers that be versus the individual, and the effort to squash the rights of the individual. That's probably fundamental. But I think if you look at all the President's Men, that was tying into an event that was a high point in journalism. Journalism never reached that zenith since, because for a lot of reasons. The internet, things changed it. But that was a pretty big moment. And probably today, you couldn't get just two guys to change the shape of a whole story that affected the whole country. So I was lucky that I tied into that at the moment before it kind of dissolved, or those conditions dissolved. To tell that story, I thought was exciting. But underneath it, okay, well, that's the story, but then what about that? What about it? Let's go deeper into it. What is deeper? Well, it became a detective story. These guys had to figure out something that there was a lot of effort being made to obfuscate the truth. And it was being done by some pretty high-level people, like the President of the United States and his staff. So the effort to crack that nut was huge. And then there was the dynamic, and then now we get down to character and where the emotion is. To me, the real heart of that story was not the event itself. It was not journalism per se. It was about the relationship between the two journalists. One guy was a Jew, the other guy was a WASP. One guy was a Republican, the other guy was a liberal. They didn't care for each other much. They had to work together. What was that like? So it became the dynamic between the two of them that interested me the most, and that's where the core of the story sat for me.